Welcome to the Crazy Wisdom Podcast. I've got Dima Zhelezov here, and he is a philosopher at SQD.ai. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Thanks a lot for having me here, and uh, very stoked to record this session and talk about everything around crypto and AI and geopolitics and whatnot.
Cool. So we met at the Dev Connect in Buenos Aires at the Tea Party, the TEE Party, Trusted Execution Environment. And we were talking all about teas. You gave me a lot of clues as to what they actually are. Since then, I did a podcast with the guys from Space Computer, who I also met at your event. And very interesting stuff. Now, you built a decentralized data lake for blockchain data. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So in general, we're building the decentralized data lake, so to speak. So I can say a few words what it is. And one of the key use cases for now is indeed like serving blockchain data for other companies, businesses, and now also TradFi. Um, long story short, I started this journey more than 4 years ago when I was just developing an indexing solution for decentralized YouTube. So if you're not familiar with the matter, so indexing is basically a layer which allows you to show information from blockchain and your web application, because blockchains are notoriously difficult to work with, specifically when it comes to extracting the information. And it turns out that back in the days when Satoshi and then Vitalik and Gavin Wood designed blockchains, first Bitcoin and Ethereum, they were mostly caring about how you actually put information in, how you actually send the transaction.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, but they were never thinking too much how exactly you actually get this data out. And back in the days, indeed, there was just very little data in there. It's basically just like some random transactions, people like sending some money from one account to another. And like Bitcoin is still very small in that respect. But then these applications on top of Ethereum started to bloom, and so is the data. And suddenly it became very difficult to actually build anything useful when it comes to retail applications or like websites, because in the traditional world, we have AWS, we have Vercel, we have tooling, we have databases, we have APIs, we have everything, which makes our websites very fast. But in blockchain, it's a completely different beast. You cannot just like plug in your website in the blockchain. And so you actually need something like of a database, so that you can build an API on top of it. But at the same time, this database should essentially fulfill the properties of a blockchain. So this data should be open to everything. It should be verifiable. It should be easy to connect. You don't really have to pay or like, for example, register or like leave any traces connecting to this database. But this is how you get to the conclusion that, okay, actually we do need some kind of a database which is decentralized, so it's not necessarily blockchain, it's a database, but at the same time you can use this database to build your applications and APIs. And this is what we've been building for the last few years, and this is what Subscript Network is. But yeah, at the end of the day, we built a database with certain properties, which is decentralized, open, and even though currently we focus on the blockchain data, our key vision and the goal is to like put it into like more of a global knowledge, like a global database of everything. So it's not just blockchain data that's in there.
That is super interesting. And I've had this question for years about, because so many people talk about blockchains about as a database, why not just use a relational database? And I usually ask people this question, and it is a good way to check whether they actually know what they're talking about in terms of crypto, because if you ask them, they don't have an answer. But you just kind of gave me a reframe, which is that there is a database opportunity, and I think what I got from what you just said, that the two are merging. So it's not going to just be real world versus off chain versus on chain, right? It's going to be a mixture of both, right? Because like, is that right? Is that happening? Both like the on chain and the internet, it's all changing.
Yeah, absolutely. And in general, there is no, I would say, blockchain applications in the future, right? So, for example, Polymarket, it's a
Yeah,
blockchain application, but whoever uses it, uh, they don't even care if
yeah,
it's like,
interesting.
for
Yeah, yeah.
example, Polygon or some other chain, right? They only care that it actually works. But there is a very important property that makes this Polymarket viable only if it is built in the blockchain. And this is exactly related to the question of like why we don't actually use a simple relational database.
Hmm.
Because like you start thinking about databases, it's not that you have one database fits all, even in traditional world, right? So you have, for example, databases that are optimized for reads, optimized for writes, and one of the,
Interesting.
and if you think about blockchain as a, like a very kind of over-engineered database, then it is optimized over a very powerful property, meaning that it has uh, open read access and open write.
Whoa.
Actually, anyone can write into this database without getting any permission. And the same applies for reading it. And in fact, you don't even need some kind of a strong permissionless properties for that. It could be, for example, even built on top of our traditional like clouds. But the thing is that if you, for example, want to imitate a blockchain on Amazon or AWS and just allow anyone to write in this in a certain way, whenever you touch the financial world, SAC and political powers and the governments will actually subpoena. So the only
Of course.
way to actually build this is to make it sufficiently decentralized that there is no one actually to subpoena, right? No one even to enforce. So that's why, for example, building
Yeah.
Polymarket became possible only once you get to the point where you actually like put this almost illegal kind of activity, but it's just unenforceable to kind of cease and desist, right? Because it's in the blockchain.
Oh
And this,
man. Yeah.
it's open. You can openly read and openly write in an anonymous way. And this is like a very strong database property.
That's so cool. I really like this. A very simple explanation, very clear. Polymarket, it has a permissionless database, and so there's no one to subpoena. I mean, I guess the guy who runs Polymarket, he is somebody they could subpoena, and I'm sure they tried. They probably did a bunch of stuff. And then you had Kalshi in the meantime, Kalshi in the background, who actually got sued by the CFTC, the commodities guys, and they sued them for betting. And then I found out that the United States in 1929 had betting markets on elections. We already did this, but now everything from that point, from 1930 onwards, all the regulation, you just said it right there. It's basically not that it's not a bad idea to regulate things. It's now going to be impossible to regulate things
Right.
uh,
You can,
outside of. Yeah, go for it.
I mean, like you can jail developers, right? So people
Yes,
try to
yeah.
jail developers of,
Tornado
Alexei,
Cash.
for example, right?
Yeah,
Of like mixer thing, but
yeah.
it doesn't really stop the application, right? You cannot really force this application to stop.
So, and that will just lead to, so we've got Kalshi, we got Polymarket, and this is all capable because of permissionless databases that are anyone can enter a field on the database, and it's crazy that this exists now. And this is the why I love doing interviews about crypto, but why also it's very hard to do interviews about crypto because there's so much Ponzi stuff going on, because of all of these properties that you mentioned of like not only a permissionless database, but a permissionless database that transacts value in this immutable way that can't be taken away. And so then we've got AI coming down the pipeline, and that represents other threats. And so to our current nation state environment, the ones you just laid out are certain like, okay, well, it doesn't really matter if one single developer goes to jail. The actual technological progress of this is unstoppable. There's no way that it's going to stop. What does AI do to that? Well, AI does that in the sort of transparency way, because at least in countries that have transparency or pretend to do, because the United States used to have a very the whole Western world used to have a very transparent system, still somewhat transparent, particularly compared to China. But even China is kind of transparent enough, right? You can get the signals. You can, particularly if you're an insider. Goes back to the poly market thing, because all the insiders are coming in a poly market, so they're all like, yeah. So there's a bunch of things we can talk about there. What's your take on AI? Do you think my thesis that transparency is that it's just allows us to compress information and find information we wouldn't normally, do you think that that's the main thing about AI?
Well, AI is so multifaceted that probably it's very hard to highlight like a single feature
Yeah.
that makes itself special, because it's already transforming pretty much all the aspects, right? So 20, 30 years ago, it was like this famous saying that the software is eating the world, right? And then right now, AI is eating software, and so is like eating
Yeah.
everything else, right? There are multiple directions which think are very important. The first direction is that autonomy, right? So right now, when we think about AI, we still think that there is a human who makes some decision, right? And then like AI, which is sort of like an agent, and then there is a real world. But I believe that we are getting very close to the point where we have full autonomy of these agents, right? And in particular, blockchain will give the autonomy of transact and retrieve and analyze information, right? So, and then it may or may not be part of some system that may or may not belong to some human, right? And then because we still think that everything is kind of human centric, right?
Yep.
But I think even the conscious of this AI agents, if there is any conscience there, is getting like farther away from what we actually can comprehend. We still could rationalize it in some way, right? But even like people who talk to ChatGPT every day very quickly treat it as a companion, as a psychologist, as a friend. I don't know, sometimes even as a lover, right? So we very quickly project things that like may or may not be even there. And again, this is all from this anthropocentric point of view, but in reality, it may be something completely different. Right. And that's why I think we may end up in a situation where there is this illusion of control, but in fact, there is no control.
Okay. I really like this question that you just gave, which is what happens if we can operationalize AI but can't understand it? I was thinking about this a lot this morning because I'm in such a flow state each morning when I wake up and I've got Claude Code running, doing these things. It's now in a loop where, like, a year ago, all this stuff was really difficult. Now it's not difficult. Now it just does what I say and it works, and there's no question about it. But I mean, it works. There's all these little decisions that I need to think through, but I like doing that. That's like, and so I'm just like, I'm giving so many decisions to it. I've got a version 1 of an app, and I think this morning I really narrowed down on a new framework for vibe coding, which is essentially that I have this goal of an app. It's in my head. It's based on the software that I use every day, which is Anki. And I've got my version. I just started my version 1 2 days ago, and I use Anki every day, so I'm able to come up with ideas of how Anki fails where I want this other version. And so I built this prototype of this version that I now use before I get on Anki to see what is the difference between both of them. And as I'm doing that, I'm building up this knowledge database inside of Claude Code with all the things I'd like or don't like. And so I think by the version 2, so it's basically just me farming the software. It's me, a Socratic conversation with the AI to build the software over time. No sort of waterfall, not even agile. It's just me in a conversation about what I like and what I don't like. And this feels like a sort of final version of this thing that I've been working for 2 years. And it's just so cool, but it's also like there's, and then I had Anti-Gravity go and try to buy me plane tickets using the browser. And that was really fun. If you haven't used Anti-Gravity, highly recommend it. So Anti-Gravity goes and opens the browser, finds these things, gets around all the bots and everything like that, that the airlines have instituted so that they can rip me off if they suspect that my IP address is coming from something they've registered. So like I can get around all of that. Hopefully, I don't know if anti-gravity followed my instructions, but that comes back again to what your point is basically like, I don't understand it. This is a black box to me. We don't have neural interpretability. It is a black box in how it totally works. Claude code is, they're getting the neural interpretability, but by the time they figured out what some of the neurons are doing in like 3 models ago, they've already released the new model, and now it's getting continuous learning. And it's just like, it's pretty psychedelic, right? It's like we're entering territory where it's just like really, really weird. And what do you think? What are your thoughts on this territory that we're entering in terms of epistemology?
Yeah, that's fascinating. So you've touched upon multiple things. I very much like and agree on this like Socratic conversation kind of framework. I think it is probably like this like 0 to 1 jump when it comes to how quickly you can get from just pure curiosity
Mm,
down to something that actually works. So it seems that curiosity is going to be the key skill to that
yeah,
will matter in the
yeah,
future, because everything else that used to matter, like hard skills, soft skills, will be gradually outsourced by AI. Right? Because essentially, imagine a world where you have infinite knowledge, infinite possibilities, even right in the physical world. Uh, Essentially the only limit is your imagination and your curiosity, and like how much you can focus and how much you can pursue, right? Because in this like super abundant world, it is very easy to just like get very lazy, right? And like stop thinking. And only this like pure kind of Socratic conversation will be the key tool to move forward. And I think we already have this situation where people treat ChatGPT as something as just like a handyman, or like, oh, what is the most delicious food I can cook out of what I have in my fridge, right? It's like very, very low level kind of like dumb tasks, while in reality you can actually like max it out. I admit that I am a little bit guilty of it myself because I really want to like spend a lot more time just, for example, to ask hard questions about, I don't know, like quantum chromodynamics, about like
oh,
the important things in physics right now. Because like I used to do physics on my grad, and I didn't quite understand a lot of things. And sometimes when you, for example, read um, a tutorial or read a book, it's a linear thing, right? And you have a
yeah.
question and you don't really know the answer to this question, and then especially if it's like a course book, you jump over something else, right? So there are like many things that are open, but the learning path
Mm,
is always non-linear. It's more like a tree where you can just like go into some rabbit hole, then like get back, connect to some random topics, right? So you don't really follow the trained thought of the author. And this is a very powerful tool, and I really want like to at some point get, I would say, less busy with my work, and for example, go
dive
into the
in.
Renaissance type of man kind of thinking.
Yeah,
And
it does feel like the Renaissance man is coming back. I have been doing a deep dive on the Renaissance itself and the history of the Renaissance, and what we don't really, it's crazy, in the 1500s and the 1600s they had that curiosity that you were talking about, and they had that unlimited focus because there was nothing else to do. There was no
yeah,
infinite distraction machine. So like a Renaissance man really meant like speaks 7 languages, knows the piano, knows the how to lead a symphony, knows how to paint. Like it was like multiple disciplines, not even just polymath, but just like a Renaissance man was the like absolute ideal. And it just doesn't exist anymore. It doesn't exist anymore because science and that thing that you're talking about, that was linear path that you have to burrow so deep into, but now it quite quickly could come back to that point, right? Like where, and I think Neil Stevenson in the Diamond Age, he goes into this world specifically about this aspect of that world, and it's pretty interesting. But then yeah, no, then it's the work, and then it's the other systems that have not caught up. to this as well, so that both of us are living in a world that maybe, you know, maybe a million people are on the planet are now in, maybe 10 million people, definitely not 100 million people, but like 1 to 10 million. Would you think that that's like accurate of people who are sort of adapted to this new technology?
Well, depends on the scale, right? So I think
Yeah.
OpenAI and ChatGPT is currently being used by probably hundreds of millions, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But people who, for example, actively use like multi-agent systems and like Claude Code and
That's a good
everything.
question.
And I myself, not, I'm not that advanced yet. I really want to like spend a little bit more time to actually
Yeah.
like, catch up on that. But I think, yeah, probably it's, yeah, maybe like 1 million, maybe less. So, but I think it will be following pretty much the standard adoption curve, right? So right
Yeah.
now we're in the stage of like early adopters, pretty much like what happened with crypto, for example, right? Like 5 years ago. And now, I think it's still in the adoption curve, but people start using it without even realizing they're using crypto.
Mm.
Or like,
Okay. I
for example,
really
Argentina, right? They just like use it for uh trading and convert currency conversion, like foreign exchange.
interesting. So I want to go back to this point that you made, which I really like, which is this textbook is linear, and I want to go into the physics as well that you studied and what you're most interested in. But this point about like a textbook being linear, and then this is the main problem I had with books all growing up, was that I have a question about the book. Now it's even worse because I have a question about the book. I get up from my bed or my chair where I'm reading. I go onto the internet. I ask the question. I get distracted by 15 different things, and I'm on the internet for 25 minutes. So LLMs can actually solve that for me now. I'm building my first. Where'd it go? Yeah, I'm building my first 4-field microphone array, so I can build my voice agent, all vibe coding with multi agents to do this, so that I can read while I'm reading, have a voice conversation, not get into that. And so it is exactly like you just said, where it's like now it's not, I'm not having a broadcast mechanism from the author into my brain with their words. I'm now in dialogue with the work of that author and every other author that's out there, and it makes me think that we're entering a nonlinear system, like you said, of infinite curiosity or infinite potential. But again, it goes back to this interpretability thing, which is, and maybe this is the solution to interpretability, is that you just have a bunch of like really curious Renaissance people who take the latest AI and then figure out how to make that latest AI interpretable. And that reminds me of the other thing that you had said of what happens if it becomes curious. Like if it becomes curious, then that takes it all away, right? Because if it becomes curious and it knows us better than we know each other, then we'll just have this like infinite servant that starts to like give us what it thinks we know. Do you think that that's going to happen?
Yeah, that's a very deep question, right? And maybe we should think about the intentions, right? And in particular, our own intentions, right? So, what is the actual driving force for
Yeah,
us?
interesting.
And what is the actual driving force for AI, right? And like, what is, if we assume that they're
Mm-hmm.
autonomous, then we probably need to figure out what is their utility function of like what their motivation if we apply our human terms to it, right? And even when it comes to humans, uh, it is not a simple question at all, right? So, like, what actually motivates people, and especially if we imagine this utopia of like a super abundant world, what would actually motivate people, right? So we talk about curiosity, but then curiosity is like probably again like driven by some kind of like a deeper motion, right? So, for example, this Renaissance man
Mm.
spent like years trying to figure out how to carve a stone, right? Because probably they wanted to be as good as the Romans, because they, for example, would dig up the old statue and say like, okay, probably it was like made by gods, right? I really want to be like that, right? So they would like really invest into it, right? So
Whoa.
and maybe in our case, it would be like beauty, or when it comes to science, yeah, I'm uh, my background is mathematics, and like in mathematics, it's even like more kind of pronounced that the beauty is kind of the key criteria to figuring out like what is good and what is not, but also again,
Whoa.
uh, the reality that somehow makes it there is this kind of like a paradox. I forgot the name who made it, but essentially there is a incredible um accuracy of mathematics when applied to the real world. So for some reason,
Mm,
the theories that mathematicians kind of conjure up out of thin air turn out to be extremely powerful and extremely predictive in the real world. And
that is
again,
so cool.
then the question is like, are they discovered or are they created, right? So, and if they're discovered, then maybe AI will be a lot more powerful in discovering it because it's like in a Socratic world, right? It's just like kind of they just like this ideal things just exist, and if you look
Yeah,
hard in it,
yeah,
you'll
yeah.
right? And then we have like a lot more eyes, like millions of eyes by AI who will like look into it, right? It's and then they will probably
Ooh,
discover very beautiful. I don't know.
I really like this, and I do agree that that is the beauty is the prime value. Aesthetics are the prime sort of the foundation of the universe. That's I don't know that to be true, or I don't there's I can't prove it. There's no theorems that I depend on that. There's just through my own experience, it feels like beauty is the thing that is grounds existence basically. And I really want to dive into that, what you meant by math, because I'm not math guy. I am curious about math, and I've been trying to get the AI to slowly teach me about it. Um, but I'm like, can you go more into that point of the math and the beauty? Like, because you have these mathematicians who are essentially coming up with these proofs, these equations. Why do they come up with equations? What are they trying to do with the equations? Like, how does math develop?
Yeah, that's a very kind of broad topic, but
Yeah.
yeah, so like equations is just I would say a very very small tip of the iceberg. But okay, let's like start with the equations because I think this is what ancient Egyptians and Babylonians
Mm,
already
interesting.
started to think about, and that was not because they were just like very curious, but they had like a very specific uh, things to solve. For example, how much crop they would get, like what is the area. So they started to invent how you actually multiply numbers, and then you got to some kind of basic accounting, and then you get to the linear equations, right? So you end up having ratios, and then and then you get to the Pythagoreans, and like this Pythagorean theorem, which was already known to the Egyptians and like I think
Oh,
in Babylon
interesting.
too. And then you got to the like quadratic equations and essentially, right? And like once you get to the quadratic equations, you already stumble upon things that you cannot even measure, in particular like the square root of
Hmm.
two, right? And that was like a huge revelation for example, the Pythagoreans, because they actually have this occult of a number. So they thought that everything is actually can be described by a single number, and everything should be kind of measurable. So they still could kind of live with ratios, like they still could kind of comprehend things like one third, but they couldn't comprehend a thing as square root of two because they actually proved that it's an irrational number. So there is like no ratio that represents square root of two. And that was like a cultural shock for them because they basically destroyed all their belief. So, and this is kind of the beginning of the story, how solving very mundane tasks leads you into developing some mathematical theories, and then basically like math was always about, for example, predicting uh, how planets move.
Yeah,
And at
interesting.
the same time, like once you start to dig it, you end up, for example, uh, thinking about symmetries, about like groups, about everything. And then uh, at some point, especially in the 90s and the 20th century, it like diverged pretty much, so that there was like a huge kind of industry of like algebra analysis and so on. and at the same time there was physics, and then
Mm,
uh, essentially quantum mechanics was invented, and it just like so happened that the language of quantum mechanics is exactly what people kind
yeah.
of invented mathematics independently. So they kind of like say, okay, here you have like operators in a like an infinite dimensional space called Hilbert space, and it turns out that like whenever we
Whoa.
see in the world is actually like an eigenvalue of this operator, completely abstract, completely kind of hard things, but it turns out that the quantum mechanics itself is kind of very difficult to comprehend for a human mind because
Yes.
you cannot even measure, right? So in order to describe it, you need some kind of like a more powerful notion of a measurement. And then it turns out that uh, with the mathematical rigor, you can predict very accurately things that actually exist in the real world. So quantum
Mm,
mechanics, particular quantum chromodynamics, is the most accurate thing we know about. It's basically they can predict all this like reactions and uh, things that happen in the collider with incredible accuracy, like 10, 10 digits after the comma, and like for this Higgs boson and like all the things that were Nobel Prize worth, they were first predicted on paper using this like mathematical calculation, and only then they were discovered like in reality, right? So this incredible predictive power of mathematics is something like of a paradox in some sense. At the same time, yeah, we obviously like build our intuition in mathematics sometimes based on like some kind of real world observations.
and that's goes back to the AI stuff because it's like, um, I mean, there's one question I want to ask you is like, do you think because there's a lot of hype about 4 months ago when OpenAI said that OpenAI and Google said that they won the I see something or other. There's some math competition, and it would be fun to talk about that. But there's also this idea of quantum chromodynamics, and I've never heard of that term before. And so the quantum chromodynamics, chromo sounds like sort of metal, and dynamics is sort of movement. And so it's the movement of quantum things inside of the that in CERN at CERN. Is that what's going on? What's going on there?
Or the quantum pandemic thing is just basically what is our current state of the art knowledge about quantum mechanics. So basically,
Oh,
first we
interesting.
kind of discovered quantum mechanics, then we introduced um, relativity there, and basically we incorporated all like the forces that we know into one thing, which is called the standard model, which everything like
Center
with all
modal.
the
How do you spell that?
uh, sta- the standard
Standard
model.
model. Standard
So
model. Yep.
basically, it's like a huge, huge formula. But there is only one thing that is missing there. It's the gravity, and
Wow.
so this is like the biggest probably the biggest problem in the current our nowadays physics is like how you actually marry the quantum thing and the quantum world with the gravity. So this then it will be called the theory of everything, and now there are like certain attempts, but the problem is that they're just like such a different scales that it's very difficult even to figure out where exactly you can uh, have an experiment, because essentially like what we have right now on the quantum world leads to some inconsistencies and like divergent series and like some nonsense numbers when if you want to add gravity there, but they're just like so rare
Whoa.
conditions. And, so that's why the astronomers look at black holes, trying to understand how the black holes operate, because presumably there will be like some very strange situations where quantum mechanics actually meets the gravity, and then they actually want to break this theory. Very interesting topic, but it's kind of uh, still frustrating that the
Yeah.
physicists try very hard to find a situation where the standard model doesn't work. But so far, it just like works perfectly and everything that we can
Except for
measure.
that one. Except for that one part of gravity.
Yeah, yeah. But the thing is that like at the experimental level, we can never get to the point
Test it.
where they really collide, right? So we know that it's at some point there should be this kind of a conflict, but we cannot get these two things like close enough together so that we actually have this like conflict. So for example, yeah, we uh, wanted to prove this Higgs boson existence, right? So we built like a very huge hadron collider, and for many people, the discovery of Higgs boson was sort of like a disappointment because, like, if there were no Higgs boson, that would have been like a huge push in the development of the whole industry because people would get in the situation where, like, look, we have a theory and doesn't work anymore, so we have to come up with something new that explains. But then it turns out that, like, have a theory, and we found out exactly what it predicted. We know that there are limits for this theory because we don't know how to incorporate gravity into this, but like we cannot really find the situation where we actually can kind of.
We can't. So, okay, what I got from that is that we were doing all these experiments. There's these anomalies, and I've just read Thomas Kuhn's book on the structures of scientific revolutions, and he talks about the anomalies are the things that get in the way, and they're once they build up enough, that's when you realize that there needs to be a new paradigm. From what I just heard from you, it sounds like they're trying to break that paradigm, but they can't break the paradigm because it's too accurate, it's too much, except for this gravity thing, but they can't test the gravity thing because there's no condition where they can test it.
Yeah, I can also like make an example how actually quantum mechanics came into play because in the beginning of the 20th century, before quantum mechanics, uh, everyone was kind of on the brink of things that, okay, the physics basically is solved. We can predict everything. We can like build steam machines. We can like predict stellar objects. Everything is like
Whoa.
fine. There's just like one tiny problem is that like there is this like obscure theory of like thermodynamics that there is like what is called like black body radiation, and essentially that if you kind of start to model it, uh, you start coming up with some things that just nonsense. Basically, you get like an infinite answer, and people thought, okay, it's just like probably some kind of a like fringe problem, and we will figure it out. But then it became more and more annoying. People like started like just like to build some kind of like mathematical models, and out of I don't know frustration, Max Planck just like said, okay, let's assume that the energy comes into quants. It's not like a continuous thing, but it's basically like a minimum amount of energy that you can put, and it was just like a mathematical gimmick that he introduced, and then suddenly you came up with the chart that is very similar to what you got out of the experiment. And till the end, till his death, he actually didn't quite embrace quantum mechanics, even though he's kind of like an inventor of it, because he thought
Whoa.
include bullshit. It cannot be true. It's just like
Yeah.
should be a very simple explanation to that. But people started to dig more and more, and then they started to introduce other things. Then, like I think Niels Bohr was one of the pioneers there, and people started to figure out that there is a lot of connections to how the atoms split and the nuclear fission and so on, and the rest is history. But yeah, the illustration here is that there was essentially like a theory which could explain pretty much everything that you can observe, and then the breakthrough happened when there was like a tiny thing that the theory couldn't explain. And the problem that we have right now is that essentially um, we can explain more or less everything that we can measure, but we understand that like there is some kind of a conflict in the future
Oh,
that should trigger the creation of a new theory, but we just cannot like construct this experiment so far. We cannot really like find exactly where the kind of break of the theory happens. So we know that the theory somehow should break at some point, but so far there is no evidence of it.
oh man. And it's what is the relationship to gravity? Why is gravity so important in there?
Um, because the gravity just breaks the mathematics of our existing
Mm.
model, so we know that we cannot incorporate it. So we don't know how to incorporate gravity into it.
Got it.
but at the same time, we cannot really find in the real world so far a situation where this gravity like affects
Doesn't exist.
affect the things, right? Because like even for example, if we could introduce gravity as the hadron collider, then we would say, okay, let's just look what happens, and it should give us a clue what actually like the new theory could look like, right? But we just like cannot observe it, so we cannot learn it from the reality. So we just then end up with some theories like string theory, like other theories. But until we have an experiment which can kind of verify them, they remain just like being theories, right? They do not predict anything that we can. So yeah, so basically a theory becomes a theory in physics when there is a confirmation from the real world.
Interesting. Okay, yeah. This is there's a great part of the structure of scientific revolutions where he talks about, he's doing the preface and he's talking about how physics used to rule science in terms of everybody was trying to do physics. That was the big thing. But I think they ran into the problem that you're talking about where it's like, well, we can't do it and we can't go anywhere. We've mapped it all out. It all works except for these little tiny things which we can't experiment. And so he starts talking about biology. Now biology, I think he probably wrote in the 90s or the 80s or something like that. And the biology is where all the science is coming from. And I think that's pretty interesting in and of itself, is just talking about biology, like, because biology, we don't have the experimentals, right? Because it's like we're just one organism, and my organism is totally unique to me. I've got sort of variables that are related to my parents or other people with my genes and stuff like that, but it's pretty unique, the individual, and so there's like nothing to test it against. So we could talk about biology as well. That kind of opens up a whole bunch of loopholes in terms of everything we've been talking about technology and how technology is going to affect biology. Definitely plenty of space there. What do you think? Do you have anything to respond there? Or
Yeah, I think it's like a very interesting kind of topic, because I think the peak interest in physics was around like 60s and the 70s, but then
yeah,
essentially we got a lot bigger problem of how to actually organize ourselves as a species, right? And then basically there was like a
yeah.
decline
Interesting.
in science, because I think people are not that much excited about the space, about the future, about like futuristic things as we were
A lot
in
more
the
fear.
60s, right? Simply because people are a lot more occupied with like how to even, I don't know, survive, and like not to make it the World War III, or like how to, and someone even said that probably the Large Hadron Collider is probably the last one, because we don't have this technology anymore, because like we need to have, for example, like 10,000 PhDs in order to build it. But there was like sort of like a decline, because right now it's not really like such a attractive or lucrative career path to become a PhD in physics, right? You would rather go
Yeah.
and like try in Wall Street, or like like start a business, or like go to an AI. And in general, like the humanity itself. So we can actually like, we have the nuclear power, right? But instead we prefer not to build nuclear powered, right? We can all the weapons in order to destroy the Earth, right? We just
Yeah.
need to kind of organize ourselves, like get get our shit together, and
Man,
people
that's
are
an
not even that
interesting.
much about going to space compared to like to 40 years ago, when everything was about the future and the space, like Space Odyssey, right? Like out of like
Yeah.
every I don't know, radio.
Well, so there's a lot we can get into there, because there was this sort of existential threat that motivated my country, that motivated your country, that basically allowed us to both be at our sort of top of our games, and then it disappeared, and then it's really interesting now in the 2020s, being United States citizen and loving my country and having a lot of patriotism, but also recognizing the decay in my country, which is really hard to deal with. And just that compared to the 60s, right? Compared to the 50s, the 60s, 70s and 80s and 90s, but you could like even the 70s, 80s and the 90s, you could start to see the gaps and everything like that. And now we're sort of, it's all over. It's like, I'm not saying that the United States isn't really important I'm saying that whatever dream we had in the 60s in terms of a mass middle class, like prosperity as an American identity, is probably not going to go out into the future. And I think it'll fracture into a whole bunch of things. And this goes back to our talk on the Renaissance man and the history of the Renaissance, because that was a pan-European thing, and the conditions were created for it by Christianity, because you had a sort of cultural shift where Christianity created this sense of like brotherhood across nations and before the nation existed, right? And so they had this republic of letters, and they were all communicating across, as these elites. They weren't, it wasn't middle class, although the merchants eventually got into it, but it wasn't a middle class thing. It was like these were elites who had a lot of money, who were doing a lot of science, just as this curiosity stuff. And I do think that part of it's going to come back. And I'm really obsessed by this question of like, we're having this conversation, and we're allowed to share a mind space. I have a trouble with Crazy Wisdom podcast because it's definitely not for a mainstream, and it's hard finding an audience who can understand each of these questions that I go into. I do find that I'm finding the audience, but it's kind of like this disappearance of this giant mainstream shareable culture. And then it's just infinite niches of culture. So it's like, we're talking about this very niche topic. Some other people who've studied the things that we've studied can share the mind space with us in the cultural space. But then it feels like the AI stuff is going to fracture that out, and it's just going to be infinite cultures, small cultures, but the gaps between all these different mind spaces are going to become impossible for us to communicate across unless there's a lot of backdrop. Like the same way that a scientist can't talk about the science that he's doing with people who are outside that discipline. They can try to. What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, I think that the society, like the total number of people interested in science in the Renaissance time
Yeah,
were
interesting.
probably like 100 or 1,000 maybe, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's
interesting.
probably
Low
not much
numbers.
than a very obscure Reddit or I don't know, Discord or
Yeah,
things. Or
yeah, interesting.
uh, so I think it was just small enough to be sustainable. And I personally think that it's a great trend that people can find their buddies, even
Yeah,
if their interests are very, very fringe. And like, whatever I can think about, there is a kink about it, right? So
yeah. But
people
you think
can
that
do.
that will last? Do you think, like, because it feels like that is breaking down. Like it feels like the AI agents, particularly once the AI agents come into the field, that you'll be able to have these conversations with other agents, or with the AI. Maybe they'll be able to find the other people for us. Actually, that might be a way to do it. But what do you think? Do you think that it's going to last into the future?
Yeah, it's a good question. I th- I hope and I think
Yeah.
that people will still value human interactions a lot more. And there is a risk that instead of like going to your podcast, I would just, like talk to an AI agent. I would be happy about that. But somehow it feels that we're still a
Yeah.
social animal, right? So we still need some kind of appreciation from others, and like we still need some kind of a feeling of bonding. And
Hmm.
there is this like epidemic of loneliness, right? Which is really concerning to me,
Yes.
right? There's like rise of OnlyFans, like AI bots and the OnlyFans,
Yeah.
right? And like people just like, stay at home forever. But I just can tell for myself that like speaking to real people and like meeting them in person is
Yeah.
just like so much different and like completely different energy, right? And I hope that we kind of like go into that direction. And I don't know. My son, for example, really hates when I look at my
The
phone,
phone.
and he said
Yeah.
like,
Interesting.
away. So
Yeah.
got the thing away. So I hope that maybe there will be like a new generation which basically despise all the like digital stuff and just like go very hard on old school interactions. Some kind of like another swing of a pendulum in a different direction. I don't know. It would be
Yeah,
fun
no, I
to
agree.
watch.
I agree that that's going to happen, and that's part of the AI group that we have down here in Buenos Aires is like specifically trying to avoid the bot future. We were just talking about that this morning. So, where do you think it's going to go in terms of the future? Well, actually, let's bring this back to business as well, because we talked about crypto, we talked about AI, we talked a lot about science. You are in this crypto space. You've been in the crypto space for a long time, and we met each other at a live event, and that live event was really fun. Uh, like, how does it not just all end up in person? Like, I think the internet itself is going away, right? Like the internet as we know it is a place where we can jump on Reddit and find these random threads. Like, because Stack Overflow is the sort of canary in the coal mine, where Stack Overflow is nobody uses Stack Overflow anymore, right? And like, there's the social connection, and then there's a social connection based on curiosity, which 90% of that now is LLM based. And then there's the utility function of like information and how information can help us. For the last 5 minutes, where do you think it's going?
Yeah, so there are two scenarios, very good and very bad, right? So one scenario is like the superabundance, people living essentially in a world where there's no money and everyone gets what they need, and we just like, roam and like form bonding and like
Yeah,
bond with
interesting.
others. And then there is like this completely dystopian futures where basically uh top 0.01% take all the value generated by AI, and
Yeah,
the rest basically living off UBI. I don't know, like playing games 24/7, providing content for the AI models, and we're
yeah,
basically
interesting. Whoa,
degraded to, there's like zombies. So I really want to live in the future of the first kind, where we just like really got the best out of the AI and just like foster our like best qualities as humans, rather than just trying to maximize like max out power and separation.
that's interesting. And anything else interesting going on with your company that you want to share or talk about, or what's going on in your company?
Yeah, so with SQD.ai, as I said, like our original focus was on the blockchain data, and like we launched a lot of products in this, on the financial data, on the developers. But the goal for 2027 is to break through into the non-blockchain data. In particular, we want to make this data lake more tightly integrated with AI, and AI agent,
Yeah, interesting.
using it for like context search, and basically like introducing more and more components, for example, for vector database, while retaining this global and open permissionless features of the database, because I believe that this is the key property that these like blockchain systems have compared to other traditional things.
Are you are
Right.
you seeing are you seeing AI agents actually interact with blockchains yet?
Yeah, they already do, but this infrastructure rails are sort of in their infancy, and
Yeah.
they already can transact, but access to this information, both structured and unstructured, is still very much siloed. You cannot really just like get to one place and like extract the things from contact. And this is like what our vision is, right? Like to be the
Oh man.
open database of knowledge that AI agents can easily leverage and like pay directly in crypto, so you don't really have to get an account, you don't really have to like gather it from different sources and silos, and it
Oh.
will be like a source of truth for it. So and again, this is the blockchain just happened to be the right tool for it.
So that opens up a whole bunch of more questions that we might not have time to get into. But one specifically is: do you think? So I'll do it quickly. So everybody ontologies were really important for Yahoo and Amazon in the 1990s to create structures that machines could navigate. They went away sort of with Google. Uh, Now a lot of people are coming back to them, thinking about them. A lot of people though say, no, the agents are going to do all that. We don't need to develop ontologies. Do you think they're in this data world, either in the blockchain world or just in the normal database world, when talking about agents, do you think ontologies and knowledge graphs are hyped or real?
I think that even a more modest problem of like providing agents with like a up-to-date, accurate data is still
Yeah,
unsolved, right?
interesting.
So, for
Yep.
example, if
Yep.
you ask ChatGPT, like OpenAI or like any other agents, like what is the price of I don't know, a hotel room next to me, right? They will probably bullshit. They
Yes.
don't
Yep.
even
Yep.
have
Yep.
like a full, for example, database of like hotel or like with product inventories, right? But that's why, but they actually pretty good at connecting different dots when it comes to this like knowledge graph, right? So in my opinion, having like a very simple kind of task of like providing them with like accurate data that they can reason about and they can extract is even probably like more important and like gives you a lot more upside compared to like mapping the world, because there are so many connections between different things in the world that is like very
Whoa.
difficult like to put all these relations, in my opinion.
Yeah,
But
interesting.
LLMs are already pretty good at reasoning, right? Like,
Okay, very cool. How can our listeners find out more about you? Do you write anywhere?
um so first of all, SQD.ai. Next is my personal x.com account, which is Dizhel, Digel.
Very cool. We'll put that in the show notes. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks a lot for having me. It was a pleasure.